Now let the conquests begin. The Persian Empire, also known as the Achaemenid Empire, began roughly in 560 BC. As you can see, the story of Alexander's military campaign in Asia starts with the Persians. They first invade Greece around 490 under King Darius I. He had also founded the city of Persepolis, which became the capital of his empire. The Athenians defeat them at the Battle of Marathon. The race that we run nowadays got its name from Marathon. That is an actual place, it's really close to Athens. After the death of Darius, his son Xerxes continues the invasion in 480. That's when we have the Battle of Thermopylae, you say in English. King Leonidas of Sparta and his small force resist heroically, but they are defeated. And the movie 300 tells that story. We have the sack of Athens. Xerxes burns Athens down, including, of course, the Parthenon. So the one that you see today is not the one that was burned back then. Battle of Salamis. Salamis, you say in English. Salamis in Greek. The Greek naval forces, led by Themistocles, defeat the Persian fleet in a decisive battle. The movie 300, Rise of an Empire, tells that story, which is practically like a sequel, but not in the sense that it really features the same characters because everyone died in the first movie, but it continues the story. And then in 479, we have the Greeks achieving a victory at the Battle of Plataea and Mycale. No movie was made about them, and to be honest, we hardly ever mentioned them in Greece either. So almost 100 years after the end of that invasion, Alexander would embark on an epic journey that would last at least 10 years, from Greece all the way up to India, a total of at least 32,000 kilometers or 20,000 miles, and we will take this year by year. As I start recounting the story about how Alexander attacked the Persian Empire, I'm actually drinking my coffee from my Alexander the Great mug, which says Alexander, conquest, drama, civilization, battle, philosophy. I don't know what this is supposed to mean, but okay, it's funny because conquest, I'm not really a fan of that, to be honest, and that's why I think he's kind of controversial. But we'll get to all of these things. And at the same time, I'm eating something that we call sweet preserves, which is something that you can eat in Greece. It's quite common to enjoy with coffee. The one that I'm having is olive preserves. You won't find that very easily, and it's amazing. We are now really far back in the past. This is 334 BC. Alexander departs from Amphipolis, leaving his mother Olympias and Greece behind. He will never see either of them again. First, he visits Troy, a city renowned for the Greeks due to the war that was immortalized in Homer's epic Iliad. By the way, Prince Paris of Troy, who caused the war, was also known as Alexander. It is said that Alexander the Great and his friend Hephaestion ran naked around the tomb of Achilles, the greatest Greek hero whose beloved friend was Patroclus. They ran naked around the tomb. Okay, that sounds really... I don't know what to call that. I'm not gonna get into that at all. But I'm just highlighting it, let's say. The Iliad, by the way, even started with the phrase, "Sing news of the anger of Achilles," which caused untold misery and sent many noble souls to Hades. In a way, this could be told also of Alexander the Great himself. The young king took the legendary hero's supposed shield that he found at Troy and had it with him throughout the journey. Alexander and Hephaestion probably compared themselves to Achilles and Patroclus. From his mother's side, Alexander was a descendant of Achilles. Who knows? Okay, this is all mythological genealogies. From his father's side, he was related to Heracles. Yes, of course he was. So he was mythologically connected to Greece's greatest heroes, Achilles and Heracles, and through Heracles, who was the son of Zeus, he was related to the king of the gods himself. Alexander wins his first major battle against the Persians at the Battle of Granicus. The Granicus River is now called Biga, and it's part of Turkey. Ironically, a big part of his journey is situated in what is now Turkey. This is how Alexander begins his campaign to liberate Greek cities in Asia Minor. Nevertheless, at that battle, he even fights with Greek mercenaries working for the Persians. Alexander has the Greek traders of Granicus executed. Way to go, Alexander. The following month, he enters the Greek city of Ephesus. He actually had a connection to the city because it was said that on the same day that he was born, the legendary temple of Artemis was burned down by an arsonist who wanted to go down in history that way. What a psycho. We're not gonna do him the favor to mention his name. The rebuilt temple of Artemis is the one that got into the Greek list of the 7 wonders. I've talked about Ephesus, by the way, in the episode Greek Cities of Turkey. Now we are in the year 333 BC. Alexander visits Gordium. That's located near modern-day Ankara, the capital of Turkey. The city was famous for some knot. The knot was tied by a man called Gordias, a peasant who became king according to prophecy after arriving in an ox cart. The knot secured the yoke of his cart and was said to be impossible to untie. An oracle declared that whoever untied the knot would become the ruler of all Asia. Instead of trying to untie the knot, because Alexander wasn't stupid, he just caught the knot. A bold move that was interpreted as fulfilling the prophecy. This action, of course, symbolized decisive and unconventional problem solving. That's where the phrase cutting the Gordian knot comes from, if you've heard of that. So as you can see, Alexander was a marketing genius because all these symbolical gestures of visiting oracles and fulfilling prophecies just gave him more power in the eyes of other people. In the same year, we have the Battle of Issus. That's near modern Iskenderun in southern Turkey, next to Syria, and it's a city founded by Alexander himself. Now it's still named after him, but in the Turkish version of his name, Iskender, hence the name Iskenderun. In several languages, though, it's still called Alexandretta. Not all people just follow the orders of Turkey, which wants to dictate its own names, of course. And I'm also referring to the fact that Turkey practically said we just want to be called internationally Türkiye, and then you start having the word Türkiye in English, but with those dots above the U and so on, which doesn't make sense because the English language doesn't have those symbols. Anyway, at Issus, Darius III finally decides to face Alexander a year and a half after the Greek king has started his campaign. So he was obviously becoming kind of a serious problem. So this is where the two kings probably see each other for the first time in the battlefield. Alexander decisively defeats the Persian king, though. Apparently, cutting the knot had already started paying off. This battle is depicted in a famous mosaic that was found in Pompeii in Italy. Alexander needs these victories and symbolisms also to feel more legitimate in the eyes of his own generals as well. Many of them were older and more experienced than him. Of course, they would have second-guessed this 23-year-old. Darius eventually flees, leaving his family and belongings behind. Alexander captures Darius's harem, but doesn't harm or disgrace them, showcasing self-control, which is a big deal for the ancient writers. Plutarch contrasts this restraint with the Persians' excessive behaviors. Alexander will be astonished by the riches that he saw. The writer of Zorba the Greek, Nikos Kazantzakis, wrote about this in a novel about Alexander, and he says, Alexander, tired, dismounted from his horse and entered the tent of Darius. He was astonished by the wealth on display. Thrones and tables made of mother of pearl, precious beds, gold plates and glasses, and alabaster perfume bottles. The air itself seemed to be infused with luxury. "Let's go now," he said, to Darius's bath to wash off the sweat of battle. The royal bath in an adjacent tent was ready. Everything in it was precious: pots, basins, sheets, and towels. Alexander took a deep breath of the fragrant air and remarked, "So this is what it means to be a king." He undressed, entered Darius's bath, anointed his body with aromatic oils, and rested. Darius's table was set in another nearby tent. Alexander summoned his closest friends and generals, and they reclined to eat. Never before had they tasted such luxurious and delicious food, nor drunk wine from such expensive, all-gold glasses. The Persian king will send a message to Alexander trying to bribe him and get his family back, which he abandoned at the battlefield. This is mind-blowing. The Greek generals advised Alexander to accept his offer, saying, "If I were Alexander, I would take it." To which Alexander replies, "And if I were you, I'd take it too." That's why earlier I had said, keep that phrase that Alexander had once said to the philosopher Diogenes, who disregarded him, and Alexander was impressed. And he said, "If I weren't Alexander, I would be Diogenes. But in this case now, he is Alexander." Also, there seems to have been a correspondence between the two men, or at least it's something fictitious, which is mentioned by some sources. In this case, Alexander's reply to Darius was something like this. And this really embodies what I told you earlier. I'm not going to take any of this crap. "Your ancestors invaded Macedonia and the rest of Greece and did us harm, although we had not done you any previous injury. I have been appointed commander-in-chief of the Greeks, and it is with the aim of punishing the Persians that I have crossed into Asia, since you are the aggressors. You gave support to the people who had done my father harm. My father died at the hand of conspirators instigated by you, as you yourself boasted to everybody in your letters. You sent unfriendly letters to the Greeks about me, to push them to war against me, and sent money to the Spartans and some other Greeks, which none of the other cities would accept apart from the Spartans. Boo, Spartans. I therefore led an expedition against you, and you started the quarrel. But now I have defeated in battle first your generals, and now you in person, and by the grace of the gods, I control the country. Approach me therefore as the Lord of all Asia. Come to me to ask and receive your mother, your wife, your children, and anything else you wish. In the future, whenever you communicate with me, send to me as King of Asia. Do not write to me as an equal, but state your demands to the master of all your possessions. If not, I shall deal with you as a wrongdoer. If you wish to lay claim to the title of king, then stand your ground and fight for it. Do not take to flight, as I shall pursue you wherever you may be." This is a moment where we might have a more historically accurate suspect for Philip's assassination, because when we talked about this, we said that it is mentioned, it is assumed, more likely, that Olympias was behind her husband's assassination. By succeeding in Asia Minor, the occupied western part of the Persian Empire, Alexander set free all the Greek cities and actually established democratic governments in all of them. Despite his success then, all of them now are part of Turkey. We are now in 332 BC. Alexander lays siege to Tyre in modern-day Lebanon, overcoming significant challenges and capturing the city after a staggering 7 months. The siege was really noteworthy because of the technical challenges and innovative tactics employed by Alexander's army. Tyre was a wealthy city-state located on an island off the coast of Lebanon. This was the city where the mythical Europa came from. The city had founded the colony of Carthage and was significant because it was a major naval base for the Persian Empire, which had taken it over around 570. That was nearly a century before they attacked Greece. This base was a threat to Alexander's control over the Mediterranean Sea. Alexander had already captured the cities of Sidon and Byblos, Sidon and Byblos, I guess in English. I've actually been to Tyre and Sidon in Lebanon, and they're both really worth visiting if you're ever there. Trust me, you should go. And you should visit places like this. I really like the Middle East in general, to be honest, and Lebanon. It became clear that the city would not surrender easily. The siege lasted for 7 months, as was said, from January to July 332 BC. Plutarch mentions this. Τύρον δε πολιορκών 7 μήνας, χώμαση και μηχανές και τριέρες 200 εκθαλάτης. Όνα είδε τον Ηρακλέα, δεξιούμενον αυτόν από του τείχους και καλούντα. This practically means after besieging the city for 7 months from the ground, from the sea with 200 triremes, he saw in his dream Heracles calling him from the walls. So what were the key challenges that he was faced with? One of the main challenges was that Tyre was located on an island, approximately half a mile off the coast. It was separated from the mainland by a wide channel. The Tyrians had also a powerful fleet, and their city was protected by massive walls that stood about 15 meters or 50 feet high. Alexander, known for his innovative military tactics, faced a unique problem in attacking a fortified island city. So while the city's fleet initially dominated the water, Alexander also built his own fleet, using ships taken from other cities of Phoenicia that he had conquered, like Sidon and Byblos. He used his fleet to blockade the harbor and prevent any supplies from reaching Tyre. He had isolated the city. To bridge the gap now between the island and the mainland, he ordered the construction of a massive causeway or some kind of structure, which would allow his troops and equipment to reach the city walls. This was an immense engineering feat. That's why also the siege took that long. But it ultimately allowed Alexander's army to bring their siege engines close enough to the walls of Tyre. He used siege engines such as battering rams, towers, and catapults to attack the city walls. A lot of this war technology that was used later on by the Romans and much later actually comes from this era. The city's defenders, already weakened by famine and constant bombardment, were overwhelmed. Alexander's forces breached the walls and the city was captured. According to some accounts, Alexandros was ruthless in his conquest. After the city fell, thousands of Tyrians were killed and 30,000 people were sold into slavery. The city was looted and many of its buildings were destroyed. The fall of Tyre marked a critical moment in Alexander's campaign. It eliminated a significant threat to his control of the eastern Mediterranean and secured his route to Egypt. The construction of the causeway is considered one of the greatest examples of ancient military engineering. Tyre's fall showed that no city could resist Alexander if he applied enough pressure and ingenuity. And he would do this again. If you thought that he did things like that only to foreign cities, think again. After the Greek city of Thebes in Greece, which is close to Athens, rebelled against his rule, Alexander responded with extreme violence. It is said that his allies demanded the punishment of Thebes because in the past they had sided with the Persians. So Alexander destroyed the city in 335, 3 years before the siege in Lebanon, killing thousands of soldiers and enslaving the surviving inhabitants. The destruction was so complete that only the temples and the house of the poet Pindaros were spared. Pindar was a renowned poet, famous to this day in Greece, who lived in the 6th and 5th centuries BC. He mainly wrote odes for victories at the major athletic games. A beautiful excerpt from Olympian Ode 1 is, "Stranger, let the days of gladness come, but know, in a short span, they fall to dust. Wealth is a gift to the gods, but a great fortune is not always blessed. For the human soul, as it is tossed by the sea of life, sails on a path uncertain, guided by the will of the gods." Alexander's actions, while often ruthless, were also calculated to enhance his status as a patron of Greek culture. This brutal act served as a warning to other Greek city-states that could consider rebellion. No matter what the reason was, this was the action that consolidated his power amongst his allies. What he did in Thebes and the fact that he only respected something cultural reminds me, in a way, of what the Romans would say later. The poet Horace said that 3 centuries later, specifically. Despite being this very militaristic people that they were, the Romans had been completely captivated by the Greek civilization to the point that they were practically absorbed by it, that you can't even make out what is Greek and what is Roman sometimes. Horace would famously say, Greece, though captured, took captive her rude conqueror. Regarding Alexander's love for culture and education, Plutarch, the ancient writer, mentioned, if you examine the results of Alexander's instruction, you will see that he educated the Circassians to respect the marriage bond, and taught the Arachosians to till the soil, and persuaded the Sogdians to support their parents not to kill them, and the Persians to revere their mothers and not take them in wedlock. And he taught the Scythians, to bury their dead, not to devour them. He then besieges Gaza. So as you can see, some places are indeed destined to be battlefields. Alexander, impressed by a vision that he had had of a figure resembling the Jewish high priest Jadua, the story says, he didn't harm Jerusalem. Some Jewish boys born during Alexander's campaigns were named after him as a mark of respect. It was going to be much later, around 160 BC, that there would be a Jewish revolt against one of his successors. King Antiochus IV tried to force the Jews to abandon the traditional religious practices and adopt Greek culture. This event is celebrated during Hanukkah. Alexander finally enters Egypt, where he is welcomed as a liberator. And that happened because ever since the Persians took Egypt over, the Egyptians had revolted against them with Greek help. Even though the Greeks, such as Athenians and Spartans, had helped Egypt, it was not in the plans of the League of Corinth, which Alexander was in charge of, to take it over. When Alexander enters, the Persian ruler surrenders Egypt to him without resistance. Alexander founds the city of Alexandria, which becomes a major center of learning and culture. The city is designed by the Greek architect Vinokratis, who is known for the monumental funeral pyre for Hephaestion and the reconstruction of the temple of Artemis at Ephesus, the one that we mentioned. Let's see how modern author Nikos Kazantzakis described all this. Now king of Egypt and Pharaoh, Alexander boarded a golden boat and sailed down to the mouth of the Nile. He circled Lake Mareotis, reached the islet of Pharos, and steered toward the shore. His eyes scanned the surroundings as if searching for something very important. His loyal friends who accompanied him asked, "O king, you seem restless. What do you seek?" But Alexander did not answer. He gripped the helm, sailing slowly, his gaze fixed on the beach. A small, poor village appeared at the edge of the shore, built on a strip of land opposite Pharos. Alexander extended his hand. "Here," he commanded. They all went ashore. The villagers were stunned by such a rich entourage. Alexander took in his surroundings. "Here," he said again. "I like it." "What's happening, Alexander?" Hephaestion asked. "Here, I will build a great city. The location is perfect. To the north, the sea. To the south, the Nile will send ships here. It will one day become the largest port in the east, and I will build temples, palaces, wide streets, great schools, libraries, gymnasiums, and theaters. I will bring sages, artists, scientists, and poets from all over to make the city not only a great commercial hub, but also a great spiritual center." "Long live Alexandria!" shouted the king's companions, already envisioning the vast, rich, bustling city Alexander had described. Immediately, Alexander summoned the Macedonian architect Vinokratis, who at the same time was busy working on the reconstruction of the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus. Thousands of workers were recruited, and ships were ordered to bring marble, wood, and metals for the new city. Alexander personally drew the plans: walls, avenues, markets, and streets. "I want it to become," he said, "the most beautiful city in the world." And for the next centuries, it probably was. And we're not done. This is to be continued in the next episode, so stay tuned. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Until next time, this is Onoufiros Dovletis signing off from Not Another Greek History Podcast.